The Huntress has the mind of a child. Susie is actually good. Sadako is underage. Pyramid Head is punishing the entity. If you have been invested in DBD lore, there is a high chance you heard some of these phrases, but the truth is that they are fan canon, or misunderstandings caused by vague DBD lore. So let's take a look at the biggest lore misconceptions in Dead by Daylight. Let's start with what for me is by far the most popular misconception I have constantly heard since her introduction into the game. The Huntress has the mind of a child. This misconception was created due to the fact that, according to her lore, the Huntress kidnapped little girls from villages as a motherly instinct, but they ended up perishing because she had no idea how to take care of them, and because she never interacted with society. And combine this with her tantrums every time she gets stunned, it's easy to see where this claim comes from. However, this couldn't be far from the truth. First of all, regarding the fact that apparently a woman that has lived in a forest who understands the concept that everyone needs food, including the animals she hunts herself, would forget that little girls need to eat too. I actually don't know where this misconception comes from, since in her official lore, it states that they die out of cold, starvation, or sickness, not that the Huntress forgets to feed them. Put yourself in the shoes of the little girls. Your family was just devastated by the Huntress, and now suddenly you are in an unfamiliar place with the lady that ended your parents, and now she is feeding you bones and intestines. As a 5-year-old little girl, would you eat that with the trauma of recent events? Where will a little girl get the appetite to eat bones and raw organs? It's obvious that the child would get sick as they are in the middle of Siberia, and also the Huntress has no medicine to cure a small child. They are weak, they need the safety of a home and the care of a family member, not a hunter that can take hours and hours to return home. We didn't even talk about water, the most important necessity. Where would the children get water from? We have real-world examples of people buying pets only to not take care of them. The Huntress is just like them. She wants to have a little girl as a pet, but let's not forget that she kidnapped them out of their will, that she killed their parents God knows how. She is also extremely smart, able to take out entire battalions of armed soldiers by herself. There is no logical way to claim that the Huntress has a childlike mind. But do you want to see someone that does? Take a look at Bubba. And since we are on the topic of children, and no, I'm not going to be talking about Freddy or Jonah's past voice actor, instead, let's focus on Sadako, one character that suffers from the same fate Ghostface does, people not knowing that they are not from the films. A lot of people claim that Sadako is a child, and that's because they base Sadako on Samara Morgan, the American version part of the film The Ring. However, the Sadako we have in-game is not Samara. Instead, it's Sadako Yamamura, the original Ring girl from Ringu, as she is by all means a fully grown woman, as we can see from her lore that she spent decades inside that well, which means at least 2 decades. As to how she survived decades inside a well is pretty easy, as she is a very powerful being. In fact, the Sadako we have in-game has an absolutely crazy lore that potentially makes her by far the strongest character in the entire game. Yoichi Asakawa is the son of the protagonist of the original Ringu films and books, only he is fully grown up, meaning that this version of Yoichi is an original character created for Dead by Daylight. Now, whether the Sadako we have in-game is more based on the books or the original Ringu film, I am actually not confident enough to give an answer. However, the next time you see someone calling Sadako underage or calling her Samara, you can bring up that nerd emoji and answer with an actually. You probably also heard people saying that Susie was a good person, along with Joy. I have heard this misconception from a lot of veteran players that still remember the original Legion lore, because unlike the rest of entries in this video, this is the only one that was fully retconned. If you read the bio of the Legion, you can see that after the gas station event, she was unwilling to participate in the act, as proven by her trembling hands, and Frank forced her to. Also, during these times, Joey had barely any entries related to him, so he seemed to be innocent too. This led to a lot of veterans, myself included, to believe that Frank was a manipulator that forced Julie, Susie, and Joey into doing criminal acts. However, the more cosmetics released and the more insight we have in their lore, it's clear that everyone part of the Legion were always outcasts, and they already had the killer instinct inside of them, especially Susie. We can confirm that Susie single-handedly ended the life of 2 people thanks to her cosmetics, and also that she has violent tendencies thanks to even more of those cosmetics that she has. There is no chance Susie is or was a good person. She was evil, and Frank simply ignited that darkness she already had inside her soul. Besides, if you take off her mask, she is clearly enjoying herself, and there is also no evidence of Susie being manipulated by the entity in any way, neither in the eyes nor in her visual design, which implies that she is sacrificing survivors willingly, just like Trickster or Ghostface. As for Joey, while there is still barely any lore about him, we at least know that he loves to cosplay and make his own costumes, and also he has no problem with killing either. Yoonjin is one of the most complex and morally grey survivors in DBD, but she catched way too many strays from the community claiming that she knew Ji-woon was the murderer, but she hid it because it would end her career. And mainly, I believe the reason a lot of people think this way is because on her original lore, due to it being too short, it is implied that she knew from the start. However, she only had suspicions, she never confirmed them until the end. The thing is that her Rift lore expanded a lot on this, and for the first time, we could see that Yoonjin was completely gaslit by Trickster, as he was a manipulator that used his position as an advantage against her, and in fact, created false death threats just to cover up himself. Put yourself in the same situation, and imagine that a friend of yours is suddenly the person that has done all those vile acts behind your back. You would be in disbelief, in denial, and yet Yoonjin still had her suspicions high. She was not ignoring the coincidences, she was actively investigating in order to be 100% sure that the Trickster was the person behind all the events. Like it is said in a court of law, guilty beyond reasonable doubt. Let's not forget the fact that Trickster had an edgier aesthetic compared to the rest of K-pop artists, and it was possible that Yoonjin simply believed the accidents were Rabbit fans obsessed with the Trickster, which is exactly what she suspected after Trickster asked for help. Another very big important detail about her character is that she had a rags to riches type of story, as her childhood was terrible. There was a high chance that she would lose everything she worked for. And let's not forget that the world is not fair, and we know how toxic the entertainment industry is, and plus she is a woman, so others could take advantage of her, something she would never let happen. Yoonjin is a very complex character, and one of the best survivors in the game lore-wise in my opinion, and while we can debate on the morality itself of her actions as if we were paladins, the world is not black and white. If you want a bad character, look no further than Jonah, who actually had direct involvement in ending a lot of innocent people's lives. In short, Yoonjin never knew 100% that the Trickster did everything, and anyone calling her pure evil has zero idea of what her character is about. Now, this might be the hottest take in this entire video, and I am sure a lot of people will disagree with me despite how much I want to agree with everyone. Officially, Behavior has never stated or confirmed that the nurse was a merciful character that thought that what she was doing was right, similar to a twisted angel of mercy. Now, this misconception comes from her very vague and short original lore, and also her Memento Mori animation, which shows her choking survivors and then gently closing their eyes. The thing about this is that the idea is extremely cool, and I also believe this for a vast majority of my game time. In fact, I didn't even read her tome lore because I saw that it was poorly written and outright contradictory with her established character. But what is her established character? That's where I saw that even though her new lore was bad, it was not contradictory to the character behavior presented to us in the past. For starters, even in her original lore, it is implied that she was purifying the patients inside the asylum in some way. This is where a lot of players thought that she was giving them a swift death so they didn't suffer anymore. But to be completely fair, it could be claimed that she was purifying the patients in a religious way. After all, the Father Campbell's chapel is an important part of the asylum, as well as the fact that one of her add-ons is a torn bookmark that was found inside a sacred book. I think by far the most important part of her original lore that a lot of people completely ignore is the fact that she willingly not only ended the life of various children in the asylum, making her one of the only characters in the entire game to have been fully confirmed to take the life of infants, but also she killed Father Campbell, who was by all means a good man that helped the residents. He was not one of her patients, and according to the description of the chapel map, he did nothing wrong, and his death even contradicts the eugenics lore that behavior tried to give us. Besides, her weapon of choice in-game is a bone saw, with descriptions stating that she uses this to carve both flesh and bone. That's a brutal weapon to be used by someone who is apparently an angel of mercy, giving survivors a swift death. The only thing swift about her is how fast survivors DC the moment they hear her shriek of pain at the start of the match. Still, I won't deny, I wish her lore was actually being an angel of mercy. However, as the devil's advocate, I kinda like the fact that unlike the rest of tragic characters in-game, she is the only one that had a tragic past and then she became a monster. No other character is like that. All of them are either tragic victims of circumstance or they were monsters since their birth. In a way, it makes the nurse quite unique. Now let's tackle the most problematic and outright incorrect thing I have seen various people claim. Why survivors don't fight back when characters like Chris Redfield, Cheryl Mason, Jill Valentine or Ash Williams can for sure beat the Legion or the Pig with ease? Or why don't they take the Huntress access from lockers in order to fight back? Are they stupid? Well, the answer is extremely simple, and it also answers many of the outlandish claims I have seen related to the core gameplay of DBD. That's because the entity wills it that way. Susie is not just a useless teenager with no experience in combat, she is an entity boosted killer that is able to break pallets with one leg, and able to carry survivors and hit others with just one hand, and this is obviously because the entity wills it to be this way. In fact, the same could be applied to survivors. There is no chance any of the survivors would be able to tank a chainsaw hit from Bubba or Hillbilly, or tank a spear shot from Deathslinger with no wounds. This is all done with gameplay purpose over lore, because in the official game cinematics, for example in the Legion's trailer, we can see David getting hurt in a realistic way. But hey, maybe the Legion was undetectable and David was exposed, who knows? The point is that inside the entity's realm, the rules will apply over whatever is realistic or not. And if we want to add another point in favor, we can simply say that in DBD, all these protagonists no longer have plot armor. In fact, you can die with any of the Resident Evil or Silent Hill characters in-game. Does that mean they are weak canonically? No, that's just the way it is. So applying stuff from the real world or from other video games into DBD, a game that already doesn't follow the logic of the real world, is not only pointless, but simply wrong. Myers is stronger than the entity, or the entity fears Myers. There is no chance you have never heard anyone claiming this as a fact. Just in case you are not familiar with the original films, Michael Myers is the pure embodiment of evil, and he is in a way supernatural. He is not just a guy with a mask and a knife. The reason why the community believes that Myers is stronger than the entity, or that the entity fears him, is because of two factors. The first one is that according to a lot of the community, Michael Myers came to the fog uninvited because the entity took Laurie Strode in, and second of all, because Myers, for a very long time, was the only killer that could Mori without a Memento Mori offering. However, gameplay-wise, and even lore-wise, the entity fearing Michael Myers makes zero sense. First of all, Myers didn't come to the realm uninvited. This was a misconception caused by Benedict Baker's entry about Michael Myers, where he claims that Myers went willingly to the fog. Back in the days, this was something new, since the other killers were tortured, broken, or manipulated by the entity to hunt, and Myers was the first character that wanted to do so without any entity interference. Nowadays we have Ghostface, Trickster, and even Susie, Julie, and Joey, who according to their lore came to the fog following Frank. Does it also make all of them as strong as Michael Myers? The second part that a lot of players do not understand to this day is that hooks are not the only way to give the entity satisfaction. The devs have confirmed various times that anything that gives blood points is feeding the entity. A survivor stunning a killer, healing another one, or placing a drone as the school merchant, all of that feeds the entity as long as it's giving BP. So a Memento Mori, even though it feeds the entity less, is still something completely fair in the realm. And besides, Myers still needs an add-on in order to Mori someone. If we follow the same logic and we apply this to all the other killers, then that would mean Sadako, Pyramid Head, and the Pig are stronger than the entity, because all of them can sacrifice survivors outside of hooks. But I bet you think it's not making any sense, right? Michael Myers still has to hook survivors. He still has to follow the rules of the game. He cannot just kill survivors in the campsite. He still needs to wait for the trial to start. He is just another killer under the entity's influence, just like the rest. Being the embodiment of evil means nothing, since we also have the Dredge, and it's still controlled by the entity. Besides, in literally every single movie Michael Myers appeared in, he got his butt kicked by different people. How come that same dude will beat an eldritch monstrosity? Now, if Myers was one of the entity's favorites, it's a completely different thing, and that is something that actually could be the case, as proven by the Ghostface. So if anything, think of Myers as a slave that gets more benefits than the rest. And finally, just like with Myers, Pyramid Head is often claimed to be punishing the entity by denying it kills thanks to his base kit Judgment, and that he brings the gods of Silent Hill into the match as part of his Cage of Atonement. However, this was all fan lore that was created because the original lore was just vague and honestly it sucked, and also because if you are a Silent Hill purist, Pyramid Head being a character in DBD makes zero sense lore-wise, since he was created purely to punish James Sunderland. However, everything from his gameplay and lore still confirms that just like the rest, Pyramid Head is working for the entity. In his original lore, it is stated that Pyramid Head made an agreement with the entity. As for the details of this agreement, we don't know, but it's pretty clear that Pyramid Head is okay with being inside the entity's realm. He accepted that obligation again, just like any other job. And let's not forget that any action giving blood points is still feeding the entity, and most importantly, in order to commit the last judgment of Pyramid Head, you still need to have survivors in 2 hook states before being able to do anything. Again, if we went purely by gameplay, Sadako is significantly stronger than Pyramid Head because she can Mori a survivor without hooking and without any add-ons, and the Pig is technically the second strongest, as all she needs to do is put a bear trap on a survivor. So the judgment is not a means to prove that Pyramid Head is following his own rules. Finally, a detail that a lot of players completely overlook is the fact that the Cage of Atonement are also part of the entity, and you have to look no further than the official description of the power. It states that it is a process to get a survivor sacrificed, just as if it was a hook, and also on stage 2 of the cages, survivors are directly fighting against the entity, just like they do on a hook stage 2. so the idea of Pyramid Head fighting against the entity or denying the entity pleasure is outright wrong. Let me know if you have heard of any other fan theory that is not supported by official lore. Anyways, thank you for watching and have a nice day.